Hey guys, welcome back to another video. The transfer window is finally done, and it looks like we've actually gone and got ourselves a midfielder for once. Yeah, we've got Nico Gonzalez from Porto for a fee of around 60 million euros, and of course, we need to do the whole everything you need to know about series. So today, I've got this wonderful gentleman alongside me, Albert, from the Long Ball Futebol Podcast, which is a weekly podcast about football in Portugal, and he's going to give us the lowdown on Nico Gonzalez. Albert, welcome to the channel, mate. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be talking about some of the stars of Portuguese football, even if it tends to always be when they're leaving us. But you know, we take the opportunities when they arrive.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I feel a bit responsible there as well as a City fan. So it was Adrian from Rabona TV who actually recommended speaking to yourself, and Adrian's obviously got wonderful football knowledge too. What is it you guys do on the podcast? So you're based in England, right? But you run a Portuguese football-based podcast. How come?
Oh, how long have you got? Slightly long story, but to shorten it, essentially myself and my brother both had some kind of connection or relationship to Portugal, the country. Yeah. And as big football fans, the logical next step was just watching football every time I was in Portugal and following the league and getting it into it that way. And then, the classic story, as soon as the pandemic started and everyone was sitting around at home doing nothing, we decided to start the podcast, and 5 years later we're still doing it. So yeah.
It was a month before the pandemic kicked in that I went full time with YouTube. That was a good idea back then.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then obviously like football was cancelled, your revenue's gone. That was a fun time, but good things formed from it. A lot of support, and obviously your podcast formed from it as well. So guys, check out Long Ball Futebol Podcast, spelled football, as in like I sound Scottish when I say that for some reason. But check in the link in the description below. There'll be a link to it. Check it out and so on. So let's get on to Nico Gonzalez, if that's all right, mate. So City have now just signed a midfielder. Of course, Rodri was the backdrop of this potential signing. Well, this not potential signing, this signing full stop. Nico Gonzalez, of course, a 23-year-old player from Spain, a central midfielder or defensive midfielder that's been at Porto now for, I think this is his second season. He signed in 2023. Prior to that, on loan at Valencia and, of course, Barcelona before that. So this is his second season as a Porto player. I want to know, how has this season gone so far this year? Has it been a real standout season for Porto, or just a very good one? You know, is there a lot of talk around Portuguese football about him right now? Be honest, by the way. If there isn't, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There actually isn't necessarily a lot of buzz around him at the moment, but the only real reason behind that is because Porto having a really difficult season. Okay. So it's quite hard for there to be lots of sort of positive buzz around the club when the reality is they're in a bit of a sticky situation at the moment. They lost Sérgio Conceição in the summer. He was like a talisman for them. Great manager. They lost him. They brought in a new manager. The choice that they went for was one of his former assistants, Brito Bruno. He's no longer there. They've literally just appointed a new manager from Argentina, Martin Anselmi. So it's been a very sticky season. They've underperformed in the league. They've lost kind of important games. So yeah, in that sense, it is a bit of a surprise because it's not kind of the conditions you usually expect for a big departure from the league. But that said, I think it does show that it is quite a shrewd bit of scouting, because it takes a good scout to kind of be able to look beyond the conditions that the team are in at the moment and actually see a player for who they are. And I think when you start to actually just dig down into the player, then you get a better picture of why City have signed him. But yeah, it's not been the easiest of seasons for him at Porto so far.
As for Porto, obviously everyone knows how Guardiola plays. Everyone knows what's expected. Everyone knows how Barcelona plays, where it's come from. If you're not paying attention to the Primera Liga, you probably don't know how Porto play. And I have a rough idea, but how do Porto play, and what is his role in that side?
Well, as someone who does watch Porto and Portuguese football, I'm not entirely sure how they're meant to play at the moment. Hence why perhaps the manager hasn't lasted the whole season. I think the best way to answer that question is the kind of legacy of Sérgio Conceição, and because it still lives on. You know, it's still a lot of the players that he signed, and he was there for quite a long time. And under Conceição, they were a real kind of intense counter-attacking team. It wasn't necessarily bells and whistles in terms of tactics. It was more about intensity, pressing, winning the ball back, counter-attacks, determination, desire, all those kind of things. And he did quite well under Sérgio Conceição in that sense. I think, in recent times, they've tried to control the ball a bit more, not too successfully, but for Nico himself, I mean, since he's come into Porto, he's played basically either a 6-8 or a 10, mainly 6 and 8. He did play a 10 a few times, but I don't think that was ever kind of the intention that he would play there long term. He's either played in the 2 in a 4-2-3-1, or he's played as one of the 2/8s in a 4-3-3. And he's done that. He's done that pretty well. He did get off to a fairly slow start, actually, which was quite interesting to see, because he was signed with obviously a lot of promise. When you sign a player from La Masia,
of course,
it comes with a lot of excitement, and it did take him a little while to get up to speed. And I think it was really good for him in a way, because Sergio Conceição was a very demanding manager, and he wasn't just given a place in the team straight away. I mean, he went through quite long periods where Conceição benched him, in favour of Steven Eustáquio, who was a midfielder who, in my opinion, is a more limited player than Gonzalez. But you could see that Conceição was sending him that message of, you're not going to get your place in the starting 11 on name alone or on reputation. You're going to have to earn it. But he's done really well responding to those kind of things. And I think the 2 seasons he spent at Porto, particularly under Conceição, who I think was really good for him, have been about growing into proper senior football at a really high level. Obviously, he had a taste of that at Barcelona. But Porto was the first place where he went. And as I'm sure we'll come on to, at Porto, it was kind of different stylistically. But I don't think that was bad for him. I think he's emerging from his time at Porto. Exactly that. I'd say a more well-rounded player, more experienced player, and probably much more confident in his own ability. So those are all positives, in my opinion.
No, so I was looking at some stats, and it does back up that theory about him being more well-rounded, because I was comparing some stats on just a few various sites, and like his aerial completion and all that kind of stuff was just tiny back then, but now he's more physical. Obviously, he's much more involved in a battle there. And look, the Rodri comparison is what's been thrown around a little bit. You can see why when you look at them. There's more than a passing resemblance how they move, never mind how they play. But then you cast your mind back to, Rodri schooled on Spanish football, technically excellent, but he went to Atletico, very different set of circumstances, but he learned the dark arts, so to speak, under Simeone. And I think it does make for a better player who's not just played one style all his life. And I think that probably, I'm hoping everything you've said there leads to a player who's a little bit more aggressive, which will play into the style of the Premier League, especially where football's going in the Premier League, which is so transition heavy, so aggressive, so physical. So that's interesting. And I like it when a player does have that spell on the sidelines a little bit. I think football can come too easily for some people, and it's not always necessarily a good thing. Rodri, even he was benched a bit at Man City, famously not in Champions League final, against Chelsea before, obviously he became who he is. So there's no linear path to the top. So it's interesting to hear that, What about him as a player? It's very hard to sort of, keep it to one category, but what would you say his strengths are as a player before we maybe talk about any potential weaknesses?
Well, as a player now, for me, I think his key attributes is that he's a mixture of physicality and technical ability. And those kind of physical aspects are the things that he's developed most at Porto. You look at him, he's about 6'2". He's very strong now. And I think when he joined from Barcelona, what you saw that he lacked was the kind of intensity and a bit of tenacity in midfield. You could see him getting a little bit lost at times. Perhaps he wasn't able to deal with quite high tempo football, but that side of his game has really come on. So I see him now very much as a kind of strong central midfielder, someone whose defensive stats have gone up. So he's capable of winning the ball back in midfield, which is really important. Capable of breaking up play, which is also really important. But he can drive forward with the ball really effectively.
He looks fast when he's got the ball, doesn't he? Surprisingly fast. Not like lightning, but
No, absolutely. And he's got a great, for that specific skill, he's got a great set of attributes: good height, good strength, good pace, but he can back it up with his technical ability as well. He very rarely loses the ball in that situation where your team's turned over possession and you're trying to counter-attack or break on the other team, and he's taking, he's got the ball and he's driving forward. He very rarely loses the ball, not just because he can keep the ball with good close control, but also his kind of short mid-range passing, also very good. So that for me is kind of who he is, his bread and butter as a player. Like I said, that combination, physical and technical. He'll win the ball in midfield. He can break up play. He can also drive forward. He can also distribute fairly well. And actually, one thing we have seen is him add a few goals to his game. 5 goals this season, not too bad. And he scored a few different types of goals as well. He scored some from range. He scored a few. I think he scored at least one header, which is good to see. And he can arrive late into the box. So yeah, I think his main kind of physical and technical attributes are that kind of well-rounded central midfielder, which are really good. And in terms of other things that I like about him, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure if you'd class these as kind of strengths or in terms of his gameplay, but as a player, I think he's quite intelligent. Clearly, he is able to take on board instructions and development from a manager, which is really important. You know, he worked really well under Conceição, as I said, and Conceição was quite demanding of him, and clearly wanted him to improve in different areas. Like I said, the kind of intensity and pressing and all that kind of thing, and he was able to respond to that and do it. And I think that does bode quite well for going to play under, obviously, another incredible manager in Pep Guardiola, and someone who I know from my limited knowledge of Manchester City. One of his things is that he helps to develop players, and I think that kind of intelligence side of the game is an underrated or perhaps under-discussed aspect of Nico Gonzalez, which personally I've liked quite a lot.
No, that's music to my ears. I'm a firm believer. A Guardiola side can't work without intelligence and a willingness to learn and humility. I think you need that to play for Pep Guardiola, because you just won't get a chance otherwise. As simple as that. There's always someone else. It doesn't matter how much he costs as well, as you've seen with Jack Grealish barely playing football at the moment. He costs an awful lot of money. So you've essentially you've just got me giddy by the idea of Rodri 2.0, potentially a young version. Is there anything in that? Does he remind you of anyone? I know it's a lazy thing to talk about, but I saw, when I was watching clips, I saw a little bit of Rodri, a little bit of Declan Rice. Obviously, I'm not saying to those standards, but I saw a little bit of those kind of players to him. The way he strives with the ball, the way he uses his body, because obviously he just seems to just. Rodri has this brilliant ability to use his arms and his shoulders to move people around and stuff like that. And I saw a little bit of that there.
I agree completely, and you're right. It's funny because you think about the Rodri comparison, you think, it's probably a bit too easy to make a comparison. But do you know what? Actually, there is something there. I think it's actually important in the sense that, with players like Rodri and Declan Rice, I mean, I don't personally see them as like old-fashioned number sixes, old-fashioned defensive midfielders. They might play in that position physically on the pitch.
They're 4-4-2 midfielders, by the way. They're scorned that now, but they're old-fashioned. Everyone's a 6, 8 or 10 now. You should just be a midfielder. And I'm showing my age, I'm 39 years old, but everyone was just what Roy Keane was, where they could do everything, like box to box, and that's what he reminds me of a little bit.
Yeah, I agree completely. So it's in a sense that I don't think he's played as a single six at Porto. If he has, it wouldn't be very often. So I don't know whether he would be doing that at City. Forgive me, you'll know more
probably
about.
Probably cover 6 alongside him for now, I reckon.
Yeah, well, that probably suits him more. But yeah, he's got a little bit of Declan Rice, got a little bit of Rodri, that kind of player. But yeah, that player who's going to get on the ball and move the play forward, which I think, like I said, is his main thing. Yeah,
it sounds really encouraging. Obviously, a lot of positives there. Is there anything in particular that you think he needs to work on? Obviously, bearing in mind the context of what's expected from him, he's going to come to Manchester City. City are statistically one of the worst sides in the league right now, defending transitions, defending their own box. There's going to be a lot of expectation of him, given he's essentially stepping into very big Rodri shoes right now. Obviously, in the future, he'll be alongside him. Is there anything you feel that we need to pay attention to as City fans in his game that could maybe cause some issues?
Yeah, I did think about this, and to be honest, I didn't have like a list of weaknesses in the sense of like the position that he plays and things that are holding him back. However, I think it is worth saying that I'm not necessarily 100% convinced that he will reach the level of a top Manchester City player. I think he definitely could, but I think he's leaving a little bit sooner than people thought, perhaps. Not to say that he would never get to that level, but in terms of what we've seen at Porto, we've seen a player who's developed really well and was clearly on a good trajectory. But I was personally slightly surprised by a move to such a big club at this stage. I don't think he's necessarily the player that Manchester City sign to improve the starting 11 right now. That's my kind of concern perhaps with him. I think, again, no reason why he can't succeed in this team, but I think to do that at the stage of his career that he's in, probably I would say he needs to do it surrounded by more experienced players who are going to help him grow, rather than, as you say, to kind of come in and solve a problem straight away. Yeah, that would be my only kind of caveat. Not that. Again, I'm really not saying that he can't do it. He absolutely could. But it's, again, perhaps a little bit early, and maybe if it's a situation where you're relying on Nico Gonzalez to walk into the starting 11 and fix the problem for a team of the calibre of City, maybe that's not what his level is quite yet. But I would love it to be, because I think he's got a lot, like I said, a lot going for him. And most importantly, clearly, he has quite a high ceiling if he's willing to work hard and willing to learn, which I think he almost definitely is.
Yeah, that ceiling thing's interesting. I was going to ask you something like this. Do you feel like Obviously, I know potential and development isn't linear. There's a billion reasons why someone cannot reach their potential. But do you think he has the tools, in theory, presuming there's luck, everything goes his way, does he have the tools to reach the top, the very top?
I believe so, definitely. I mean, he's not played for the Spain national team yet, but I think he's on that trajectory. He's played for the under-21s. He's 23 years old now, so the senior national team would be a next step, and I don't think that's beyond him by any means. And I think going to City, like I said, I mean, I think Guardiola will be the biggest benefit to his career.
Yeah.
Probably since he turned professional. I think that would be fantastic for him if he's able to, depending how long players like De Bruyne and Rodri and Gundogan are still around for City, if he's able to learn from those type of players, again, it'll be fantastic for him. And I think he's got already those kind of raw, natural abilities that make him suited for the Premier League. He probably will have to take another step up in terms of that intensity that I was talking about and the pace of the game. He's done it once. I think he can do it again. I think there'll be a period of adaptation for him, but if he can continue on the trajectory he's on, I think there's no reason why he can't be a very useful and important player for Manchester City under Pep Guardiola for the next few years.
I mean, that's all very fair. Even City fans will remember that Rodri came in. He's literally won the Ballon d'Or. He was probably the most complete player in world football these days, and he was in and out of the team for a couple of years. He looked sometimes as like a traffic cone. Like he just sometimes could adapt to the pace of the Premier League football, and he's not fast, but he's not slow Rodri when he knows where to be, if that makes sense. He's one of those guys who's not a fast runner, but he's fast because he knows where he is, if that makes sense. But I think it took him a long time to learn that. And I can only presume this guy is coming in at a lower level than Rodri did. He came from Atletico as a guy who was just, he was one of the best midfielders in the league at the time. And as good as the Primera Liga is, I think if he's not... Based on what you've said, he sounds like he isn't the star of the league, like the star midfielder. He's a guy who's got a lot of talent, but his development has got some way to go still. So I think it's fair to say that I don't expect him as a City fan to change our lives, straight away. The only expectation for City is that we're getting a 23-year-old who can run, whereas we've got the problems of City now. Our problems are that we have Bernardo Silva playing as a DM who's far too small, and he's tired, and Gundogan just cannot run anymore at 34 years old and doesn't have the physicality. So he's an immediate upgrade in physicality, So we'll see how he goes. Yeah, that's been really fascinating, mate. I mean, I haven't got much more to ask other than that because you've covered it all quite succinctly anyway. So thank you so much once again for your time, Albert. It's been a real pleasure, mate.
My pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, it's been brilliant.
Guys, please do go check out the Long Ball Futebol Podcast. There'll be a link in the description. Go and check out more of Albert's dulcet tones, and I'm sure his English just as wonderfully spoken. It's been a pleasure, it really has. I genuinely feel like I've learned something from about Nico Gonzalez today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give the video a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel. The transfer window, guys, we did it. We survived. It was a lot more chaotic than I thought it was going to be, I'll be honest, but it was fun nonetheless. Thank you so much to Albert once again. Check out his podcast down below, or he might be on screen. I don't know where it'll be. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye. There's a quick PS here at the end of the video. What were you just saying to me then, mate?
I forgot to say on the main record, but like I said, Portuguese football is kind of like my second life, right? In my main life, I'm from London. I'm a Leyton Orient fan, so I'm a season ticket holder. So I'm going to be at the game on Saturday.
I know, yeah.
And I very much look forward to seeing Nico Gonzalez's debut. I just hope he doesn't score.
It's a wild world in it sometimes. So they're doing this, chatting to a City fan about Nico Gonzalez as you go and see him play his first game against your side, arguably. Wild.
Could well happen.
Hat trick. Not really. Probably. I hope you have a terrible time. No offense. Cheers, mate. Bye bye.
Cheers.